I am the managing partner of the Alhambra US Chamber. We are based in Austin, Texas. Today, I'm honored as an educational entrepreneur and a lifelong learner to moderate this panel that will address a very important and a timely topic. Is our current model of education outdated? I would like to start out by sharing with you the words of Helen Clark that I have found to be very meaningful. Ms. Clark was the recent head of the United Nations Development Program, and she said, "In our world, knowledge is power, and education empowers. It is an indispensable part of the development equation. It has intrinsic value, extending far beyond the economic, to empower people to determine their own destiny." That is why the opportunity to be educated is central to advancing human development. The question before our panel, is our current model of education outdated, is not a new one. Education, by its very nature, it reassesses, it redefines itself. But today, there are new and significant pressures on education. The challenges of sustainability are forcing education, pushing education to adapt and to respond. The stakeholders of education they're keenly aware that they have to work together. There is a need for inclusion, and globally, there is a big need to gain access to education, and that need is intensifying. Today, roughly two-thirds of the women in this world, two-thirds, are without an education. As the migration populations across the world increase, the number of illiterate women rises. Even in the stable regions of the world, women face very serious barriers to their education due to financial and cultural reasons. In tertiary education, women lag far behind men, and women are the least likely to enter and the most likely to leave STEM fields. So for the next 45 minutes, our panelists will talk about the challenges that they are facing in the sectors of education that each of them represents, what they are doing to meet these challenges. Is their model workable? And we will talk of the path forward. We have an outstanding panel. They are leaders in their fields, and each of them has an individual as well as a professional commitment to innovation. Namrata Budraja heads consulting at Talent Enterprise. Cameron Mirza heads strategy at the University of Bahrain. Dr. Mac McClelland is the founder, president, CEO of Center House. He's also a professor at the Hult International School of Business. I can assure you that their passion and their knowledge will inform and inspire us. So having said that, I want to invite all of you to help make this session interactive, make it engaging. Please ask questions, share your comments, and I'm going to turn to the panelists now. My first question is directed to all of them, and Namrata, if you could take the lead on it. Is the current education pipeline working? What do you think? Are the students of today prepared for the demands of tomorrow?
Sure. So I think you introduced it pretty well yourself, Anjum. The world of work is changing. Things are evolving, and it's very important that education keeps up with these changes, right? So my first point is technology is making everything change very, very significantly. So if you look at some stats, let's talk about the World Economic Forum. It says 65% of the students in primary education today will be employed in jobs that don't exist yet. And I mean, just thinking about that fact, how is education prepared to meet the needs of tomorrow, which we don't even know that they exist, right? For me, the second point, very critically, talking very specifically for this region, is we've done a lot of research about strengths of youth. And the youth in this region have the highest amount of demotivation. So when we look at it from the research that we've done at the Talent Enterprise, the lowest strengths for the youth are confidence, grit, resilience, teamwork, empathy, all skills that are absolutely critical in the workplace. So how is education embedding these skills in their curriculum to make sure the students are ready, right? And then the third part for me is that the labor market in the GCC is a very segmented market. And the unemployment rate for the youth is extremely high. So when you look at these stats and you think about 60% of students don't want to study the same subject again, 50% of students do not pursue a career related to their field of study. So it comes back to career guidance. Are students being guided adequately at the education level to make sure they're going and taking on the right jobs best suited to their strengths and their motivations? Yeah.
Sure. So I think, well, good afternoon, everyone. And this is, traditionally always a difficult session straight after lunch on a Thursday, on a long weekend. But we will make it interesting. Look, it's a complex question. And if we look at what are the drivers for change for education globally, demographics, certain parts of the world have got a huge amount of young people coming through the system. That creates pressures on education systems. Then you have further layers of complexity in terms of the rise of consumerism. There's far more choice than ever before. Parents have got greater choice both at public level or at private level. There's very much issues around not just in choice, but in terms of quality. Quality standards vary from region to region, and there's a lack of consistency around quality. And I think on top of that, you layer on, as Namrata said, we have digitalization, adding further complexity to it. So with the money that is being invested in education globally, both at public level and at private level, if you think about the return on investment, I'm not talking about the financial return, I'm talking about in terms of outcomes, in terms of young people graduating with the skills, the mindset, the competencies, and the attitude to succeed, not just in jobs, but in life. The evidence is clear that education systems are not evolving quick enough to respond to these challenges. And if we are to address them, we need to do certain things and prioritize certain things. First of all, it's amazing to me how we never prioritize early years education. The foundation to a successful life is the 0 to 5 age group. Evidence is clear. The first 1,000 days sets the platform for lifelong learning, and it's woefully underserved and it's poorly regulated. Secondly, we have to really address what we're doing in the classroom. The quality of teaching, the way we assess students. It's, the world economy doesn't pay you for what you know. It pays you for what you can do with what you know. And the way that we need to move away from the didactic way of teaching, we need to move away from the way we test young people in just terms of memorization, pass the test and move on. We need to move away from that, and it's far too frequent throughout the world. And ultimately, the education system is input-driven. It focuses on number of students, number of teachers, and it doesn't focus on number of skills and competencies gained. And until we can flip that system, the education system is always going to be playing catch-up.
Thank you, Anjum. I'll say four things about the question that you just asked, Anjum. First of all, I don't think that students are necessarily prepared for life, much less for their education. What do I mean by that? And of course, I'm American. I speak from an American perspective, but I think you can see it in different cultures around the world. Parents, for their first 18 years, have coddled these children. They've told them that they can do anything they want to if they just decide to, that they get a trophy for participating, whether they win or lose, and the parents support them, they're there, and give them unreasonable expectations. Okay, they're being parents. Second, and Namrata touched on it, the technology. You know, we're in a world now where it's instant gratification. You know, if 2-day delivery by Amazon isn't good enough, you can get it in 1 day, and if that's not good enough, you can pay and it'll be there that afternoon. We don't want to wait. We don't want to invest in the things such as an education, such as our career, relationships. We don't spend the time to do it. You know, having 500 likes on Facebook is much better than having a conversation with someone that may talk about something you're not comfortable with. The third thing is the impatience of, let's say, the millennials, since that's the age group that's coming through school right now. They're not interested in learning about something. They Google it, put it down. There's nothing that sticks. I'm generalizing, okay? So if you're a millennial and you say, wait a minute, I'm not that way, I understand that, but I'm talking in generalities. And finally, the corporate world, when they finally graduate from university and they go to that first job, and their boss sends them an email and says, I want you to do this, this, and this, and the reply is, or a frowny face because you don't think you should have to do that, you're going to get jerked out of your seat and told, do it. And mom and dad aren't there to help you, and your friends on Facebook don't care. Okay? So I'd say they're not prepared for life. Technology is not necessarily your friend. They're impatient, and the corporate world cares about numbers, not about people.
Hi, my name is Asma and I'm a chartered accountant by profession. I have a question that for professional success, what are the key determinants? If you can tell us, what are the 3 critical key determinants which are necessary for having a professional success, and where those key determinants can be derived? And my second question is regarding social media. So where do you see our current education model doing a handshake with the current social media environment so that children can be, given updation about how to handle it? Thank you.
Okay, cool. So I'll take your first question. Talking about professional success, we work with a lot of organizations, with a lot of graduates going in, and we've done a lot of research about what makes a high-performing employee different from the rest. So there are 5 actually key things that determine a high-performing employee. The first one is your ability to work with others. Yeah? So how you are with teamwork, a high empathy, that sort of determines how you work with in a team, right? The second aspect is how much accountability and responsibility you're willing to take. So data suggests that high-performing employees take 4 times more responsibility and ownership for their work than the rest. So accountability is one clear determinator for high-performing employees. The third one is about being gritty, about bouncing back from setbacks, right? If you have a project that doesn't go as per plan, how quickly do you recover and actually learn from that experience, right? So high-performing employees are really gritty. The fourth thing is about learning agility, and I think that goes back into our we've been talking a lot about technology, how things are changing. It's about being able to adapt to that change. Not just learning new things, but also unlearning previous patterns. And I think the fifth thing that really determines success at the workplace is being culturally intelligent, right? We're all working with diverse teams. It's about having that sort of awareness and that sort of understanding and being able to work with others well.
Thank you. Do you
Anything you
Cameron, Matt, you want to add to it? Would you like to add to it, or should we go to the next question?
I'll take the, I'll try and answer the question on social media. So social media is a really, really good question. So in the part of the world that we're in today, social media has the highest penetration rates in the world, in the Middle East. So that's the world that we live in now. We live in a world, swipe left, swipe right, like, dislike, you know, and that's how it is. So rather than fight against it, what we try and do is embrace it and integrate social media into our education. So we can use social media to actually drive innovation in the classroom. So I'll give some tangible examples. In our English language classes, we actually used the hashtag of the book, and this is a true story that maybe about 18 months ago, the lecturer and the students were working on a book, and we use social media with a hashtag so everyone can see the comments live in the class. Actually, that day, the actual author of the book jumped on the conversation live and interacted with the students while he was in New York. So that's the power of social media. That's using it in an innovative way in the classroom. And also we encourage our students to use social media in informal learning opportunities, the ability to take pictures and share that on Instagram. So, you know, social media, although there are some negative aspects to it, we can't fight against it because almost every young person is using social media. We turn it to its advantage. Embrace it, use it in a classroom, use it in a way that encourages creativity, that encourages collaboration. So there are real positives to it. So, you know, that's what we've tried to do with social media.
Thank you, Cameron. We have another question.
I want to comment on the social media because I teach undergraduates. And one of the fundamental things about professors is how can they're on their laptops, they're on their cell phones, they're not listening to anything I say. Well, I'm not surprised. They're bored out of their minds. The way we still continue to teach, we put them in a classroom, you sit down, you can't move, and you're just going to listen to everything I'm going to say because I have that authority. I mean, if you look back, who here was bored half of the time they were in school? 80% of the time they were in school? Yeah, so we have now given them a device, which is called a cell phone, which during the time where they're in their teenage years, every time they get a like, it actually physiologically gives them a hit of dopamine. So they're dealing, most of their frustrations, which is adolescence, is frustrating, with a device that's actually numbing them to do that. So every time they have, instead of dealing with frustration, I'm going to connect with somebody. I'm going to try to, and you see them because they actually do it. Hello, 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 hello. Let's see if somebody actually answers me. I get a hit back, I feel better, and I don't have to deal with my frustration. And I'm bored out of my mind of the educational systems and the way we're being taught. And really, most of the stuff that you're talking to, I don't see it much relevance anymore. And everybody keeps telling me that education, which is another comment that we saw before, education is there for me to find a job, which is not the end of education. Education as a mean in itself is not it's not an end to actually a professional career. That comes later. So we're not even giving them that opportunity. And that is actually something interesting because I just got this answer just before the panel where it was, well, how old are you now? 21. And you still don't know what you want to do, right? And you're feeling the pressure since when to figure out what you want to do in life?
I come from an Indian house, so that would be 4.
When you were 4, right? Yeah. Who here at this room still doesn't know still doesn't know if the career they're in, it's where they're going to end up? Right? And how are we training for that? So those are my 2 comments, sorry. And then, yeah.
Thank you so much. We have a question here.
Hi, my name is Pooja, and I think I'm the only one who's Gen Z in this room. So I'm trying to represent all of my generation that has not even been mentioned by the panel today. We exist. After the millennials, we came in. So one thing that I noticed that, Namrata, you were talking about how we lack certain skill sets. And then it just struck me because I just recently graduated in international relations and women's studies. And when I came to the conference, I learned that the skill set that I have, which is to empathize, understand people's problems, this was considered essential and important. And after spending 4 years in a university, paying 400,000 dirhams, I had to come to a conference like this to realize that I have some value. I think someone also touched upon demographics and how the youth across regions don't have the skill and that skill. And I'd like to highlight that most of the youth populations, we're in countries like Indonesia, Nigeria, India, Pakistan, where the cultural rigidity is so high that the skill set that the marketplace requires is considered useless. So our current model is clearly, it is outdated. So my question is, when culture stands in your way, and in a world where culture dictates education rather than education giving a direction to culture, how do people like us who are the next future generation actually figure out what to do? Because we clearly believe it's outdated, but what would people like you say is the solution? And how do we bring Gen Z into the workforce when we feel so lost about what skill sets we need? Because clearly our parents think it's useless. So what do we do?
Thank you.
Wow, that's a great question. I mean, look, we'll try my best to answer it. Young people today are purpose-driven. They've got great energy. They're incredibly tech-savvy, and they're being let down by education systems, and they're being let down by educators. And I do absolutely take the point made previously about young people are bored in classrooms, and I travel, lucky enough to travel the world, and I see a lot of bored people. And there's a big disconnect between educators and young people. There's also a big disconnect between young people and the information, advice, and guidance they're given in terms of future careers, which is unacceptable. But in a new world that we're moving into, a world where jobs will be based around A, B, C, D, artificial intelligence, blockchain, cloud, data, a lot of jobs are going to be created. What we should be doing is trying to teach young people skills for life, not for jobs. Because ultimately, the purpose of a good education is not prepare you for a job, but prepare you for a life well lived, where you can have the skills, competencies, mindset, and attitude to make a difference in society and in employment. Okay? So the world we're living in is moving at such a pace. I do believe that we are now moving into a world of lifelong learning where we have to constantly train and retrain and develop our skill sets and competencies. As far as your question goes in terms of what are the skills that we need, well, actually, what you actually need are the skills that education systems are not designed to deliver. Collaboration, sales, networking, emotional intelligence, empathy. They're not designed to give you that. So what we need to do is actually evolve the education experience for young people. And that means blended learning opportunities in terms of work-based learning, in terms of internships, in terms of travel, in terms of widening your global experience and understanding of the global world that we live in. So I think in answer to your question, we have to evolve the education system as a matter of urgency. We're letting you down right now, but rest assured, there are enough people with passion and purpose working within education to ensure that we close that gap as soon as possible.
Thank you, Cameron. We have a question here. Do you want to add to it, Namrata or Matt? Okay, do you want to go ahead, please.
Yeah, in the 1660s rather, the first coffee shops opened in London. What does that have to do with education? Well, I'm not an educator, by the way. I teach very much part-time at Hult. I don't represent Hult. But anyway, coffee shops came about. And the intent was anybody, regardless of education, wealth, ethnic origin, language even, could come in and argue ideas, talk about things that were important to the day. And we've kind of lost that. Again, I go back to the US campus of today where there are safe spaces and puppies and Play-Doh and all of that. If somebody says something you don't like, you can remove yourself from it or have them physically removed, and you don't hear those opposing views. Now, that's not worldwide, but I think the trend will move to places that emulate the American education model. If they're doing it in the United States, it must be right, right? No. And so I think more coffee houses in that concept needs to be pushed into our learning centers because, quite frankly, our universities should be at the frontier of ignorance and knowledge. And we should be pulling people away, physically pulling them away from ignorance and showing them the way toward knowledge, not doing it for them, not leading them by the hand, but at least aiming in the direction of knowledge. And we can't do that if we're unwilling to communicate with each other on a one-to-one or group-to-one level. And so the skill sets that you've been told you need to have are right. None of them are wrong. There are others that may come up that you'll find more important to your particular situation that other people may not have. Use it. But what you want to have is a toolbox full of a bunch of different tools that, depending on the situation, you pull one out and you use it. And that one-to-one communication across cultural barriers and boundaries, across languages, across education levels, all those sort of things that are different for all of us in the room are things that communication is going to be what gets you what you need to know, and that's knowledge and away from ignorance.
Thank you, Mac. We have another question here.
Hi, my name is Heba Khan, and I'm a sports journalist. And my question was that we're talking about Gen Z who are currently in school, since all millennials have graduated, and we're talking about the education system being outdated. What about people who are currently in school or about to graduate? Are they lagging behind?
Thank you.
Do you want to take that, or do I? Should I?
Sorry. Yeah. So we've got students who are in their final year of study, and they'll be graduating fairly soon, and the answer is, yeah, they are behind. Not because in terms of they don't have knowledge, because they do, but what they don't have is real world experience, and you don't get that from an education institution. You need to go out into the real world, and you need to experience work-based opportunities, and you need to do other stuff as well. So in terms of being ready for the workplace, the evidence is clear that education systems are not preparing young people for the workplace. So from that perspective, they are behind the curve. But what we can do is learn from this, and what we are doing is already addressing how we deliver education, making it mandatory for young people to spend 12 weeks a year within the workplace, even 3 days a week on campus, 2 days a week with an employer. So it's actually, we're learning from this, and I think we'll be better and stronger as educators from the mistakes that we're making currently.
Thank you, Cameron.
I'd just like to add to that. I think in addition to just learning from employers, I think it also becomes critical to add character building skills, so building life skills in the curriculum. So it sort of comes back to your question as well. I think the importance of education is not just to deliver the curriculum, but build character among students. And that's what's actually missing in the system right now. So embedding tenets of positive education, helping students become more resilient, having a growth mindset, and having those sort of traits which will help them succeed not just at the workplace, but beyond. So including these sort of tenets in education will actually help students like yourself be more ready for the workplace.
Thank you, Namrata. Here's the next question.
Yeah, hi. I think I would represent the millennials here. I am a product of parents who believed in education, and I think they did everything right. I went to a boarding school, international boarding school in India. I studied in US after that in a grade school. I went to London after that for my MBA, Masters in Finance, and all of it to come back and run my family business. And I struggled. I struggled with politics. I struggled with people older than me not willing to listen to new things, to adapt to new young ideas. And I struggled for 2 years to restructure the company. And every day I was stuck in this web of lies. Partially because when in the West, I didn't focus so much on politics. I was focused on education. I was focused on developing skills, learning multicultural environments, making friends from regions. So I didn't feel intimidated around people from different nationalities. And I think I did a good job at standing tall and having conversations with people older than me. But when it came to recruiting people who are 50, 60, I struggled because I was buying everything they were saying because I believed people were saying exactly what they meant. And education didn't teach me that. It didn't teach me that, hey, you gotta be careful of what's being said to you. When you're doing sales or when you're meeting clients, you don't have to be completely honest. You have to know how to play the game. So I think what I think is despite going to these great schools and despite everything that my parents did right, I think one thing they did wrong was they kind of mollycoddled me a little bit into believing that the world's a great place and if you work hard and if you're smart, you'll achieve everything. I think real life skills such as a political bone, I think understanding intentions, having a high EQ, it happens only if you get into it earlier. I don't think it can be taught. I think you have to experience it. And how can education, then that's the question, how can education put that into a curriculum? How can you actually learn these skills so tomorrow I don't have to feel, oh my God, how will I get a job in a corporate? Because what skills I have gained from running a company, I think they're irreplaceable but I can't put it on a CV, I can't put it in anything. So how do you kind of put that in a CV or in an education program and people come out feeling confident to run companies without feeling insecure about experience?
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so if you get out your pen and a piece of paper real quick, there's a book called The Culture Map. It's written by a professor at INSEAD in Fontainebleau, yes, named Erin Myers. Erin is an American woman married to a Frenchman. She's living in France, but consulting to companies around the world and trying to understand when somebody says something, what they really mean. She calls it reading the air. That when somebody says something, is that what they mean? Is this a high context language or a low context language? Things like that. So I commend that book to you. It's a very easy read, and it goes through different nationality groups, not individuals. It's cultures, not individual personalities. And it tells you Saudis in this situation generally act this way, where people from Nigeria act that way, and it'll show you. So not in direct answer to your question, but you need to learn how to read people by reading the air of what they're talking about. And a good example was a Mexican man who was transferred to a Japanese, to his company's Japanese manufacturing plant. And his assistant, a Japanese man, he said, oh, by the way, I need you to come in this weekend. We have a client coming in from out of town and I need your help. The Japanese man says, oh, okay. The Mexican man says, oh, I'm glad you understand. I appreciate, that. And the Japanese man says, yes, that's a very important day. Mr. Diaz says, why, what's important about it? Well, it's my daughter's birthday. Oh, great, I hope she has a great birthday. The Japanese man says, oh, thank you for understanding. Well, what do you think happens? The Japanese man believes he was just given permission to stay home for his daughter's birthday party, and the Mexican boss thinks he's coming in. He's going to give up his weekend to come in. Those sort of things you have to know about the cultures, and the only way you're going to know that is to understand what they mean when they say something. Okay, so the culture map, Erin Myers.
I'd just like to add to that. I think when you're joining the world of work, you always assume the company has to hire you, right? But I think it has to be both ways. You have to select the company you have to work for. So I think it's a two-way street, and it's about understanding what your work preferences are. Do you like working in a flat organization? Do you like working alone or in teams? What sort of a work style do you prefer? And then asking those targeted questions during the selection stage, because, I mean, there are always concerns, right, when you join a workplace, but you have to start identifying what you're looking at and try to find the best fit for you during the selection process.
Thank you. Thank you, Namrata.
Yeah, the question and comments for you, I mean, and I think I represent the Gen X, maybe. We all read about artificial intelligence, soft skills, liberal arts, experiential learning, all these things. But at the same time, we are still in an environment where the most successful degree and the best way to find a job in many countries is to have a bachelor in accounting, which I have nothing against, but that's still the reality. Or if you're in the US, maybe a LLB to become a lawyer. So higher education institutions have no clue at the moment what to do. We are like schizophrenic, beheaded chickens, if you want. We have no clue because we are in between this. We know, we read, it's all over. And at the same time, a situation of the market which is still very backward. If you want the list of companies that take people without degrees, you go to Glassdoor, they list it. Well, how many? 20, 25 at the moment? Okay? We talked a lot about sustainability these past few days. How many companies are signatories of the UN Global Compact in the world? 3,000, something like this. Okay? So there is a disconnect which is not also, I mean, regulators are making our life difficult. For example, in the UAE, if you want to be accredited by the ministry, every year you need 650 contact hours in a classroom. So how do you put experiential learning in that? How do I send you 6 months somewhere if I need to have you 650 hours in a classroom? So forget blended learning, forget all these things. It has to be in a classroom. 1. 2, we all fortunately and unfortunately inherit from our parents, and our parents are still in a rather conformist model. And there are many countries where you cannot go against your parents. So if your parents tell you, you will do accounting, or you will do medicine, or you will do this, you will do that, you do it. So, I don't know, it's not an answer, it's not a question. Well, what's your opinion, is my question.
Thank you very much.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, totally agree.
So, are you going to, do you have a question? Just a comment?
Hi, I'm Mona. I actually write case studies for INSEAD, so shout out to Erin Meyer. My question is from my generation perspective, which is what, Gen Y, or I don't know what the word is for it. When we talk about the education system, we are not talking about an inanimate process of thing, a structure or institution. We're talking about teachers, basically, at the heart of it. And so my question is, from my generation perspective, we looked up to teachers as we do to doctors and other vocational, people driven by purpose and calling, right? And so they taught with the passion of wanting to teach and to inculcate a joy of learning. And I think in our discussions, we're forgetting the most important part of this discussion, the teachers, right? And today I find teachers are teachers for careers, if they even want to be teachers. Less and less people want to be teachers. And the second part of my question in regard to this is, you know, when I see working with INSEAD that after the financial crisis, they started introducing, as other business schools have, introducing programs on ethics, right? So you have an ethics class now. And I'm thinking 30, 40, 50-year-old need to learn ethics. How does that work? Because really this, so there is a concept, again, when I grew up and when I went to school, the class that was compulsory, right from, you know, what Mr. Mirza said, the 1,000 days is important. The primary education system is really, really important. And so the things like ethics and values, it's almost like parents are expecting their jobs to be given to educators, which is not right, first and foremost. The parents need to inculcate the values of ethics from home. But the kind of, the characteristics, Namrata, that you spoke about, I think come from primary school level. And I mean, we had a class that everyone had to attend called moral education, right? So, and community service. Social service, that was in school in Bombay when I was, you know, I'm 56, so that many years ago. And maybe some of the things that we talk about outdated, we need to maybe return back to the old ways of doing things. What kind of teachers we hire, what kind of values and classes we have at primary school level. And, you know, to look at the fact that it is not the job of universities and schools to give all the answers to Gen X or millennials, you know. I'm a little bit pissed off with their kind of idea that they have a right to have everything done for them. I agree with Dr. McClund on the fact that we are raising a really lazy generation, in a sense. You learn real life, and maybe part of the university or high school kind of change could be to take them out of the spoiled kind of environment and put them into a week of a slum in Bombay, you know?
Thank you so much. We are getting close to the end, and I see several hands going up. So why don't we take like 4 more questions, but we'll take all the questions and then they can answer them together. Is that?
I just want to pick up, Anjum.
Perfect, perfect. Go ahead.
To the young lady.
Yes.
And please call me Cameron. We're all friends here. Your point about the teachers is, you know, I've got to tell you, it's not rocket science. The number one critical success factor of any education system is the quality of teaching. And, you know, we never talk about it, but it's a fact. And we have to do a better job for teachers. We have to support them. We have to give them professional development they deserve. And their status in society needs to be elevated, and they need to be paid accordingly. And until we address some of these fundamental issues, we're just going to be struggling, full stop. So I totally agree.
Perfect. So we'll take I'll take all your questions and then just wait on the answers for a minute. Maybe some of them will overlap.
Thank you. My name is Kumeshni West. I'm the Director of Executive Education at the University of Cape Town, and really excited to be part of this conversation. I have 3 comments and linked to a question. The first thing is, all universities are being disrupted at the moment. There are so many new entrants in the market, and I think we're all sitting here, if we represent a university, we know that we don't have all the solutions to all the problems when it comes to learning. Yes, the model of learning is outdated. The second comment is, have we ever prepared people to enter into the job market and be ready? I think that's a big question. Have we ever done that? And we can't sit here and claim that we are going to do that completely, fully, knowing that when you enter into an organization, 70% of learning happens on the job, 20% happens with coaching and mentoring, and only 10% is formal education. So I think we need to just shift our thinking as business schools in terms of what is our role here and how are we supporting organizations to do a better job at what they're doing. And then finally, I think, you know, we're talking about the generations, and I want to just talk about business education. And I mean, 2 of you represent business schools. What is it that you are currently doing to shift the way that we are meeting the demands of business? Because that is a huge problem currently that I'm faced with, leading executives, designing programs for executives, and ensuring that they are ready to lead the strategies of their organizations for growth and execution.
Okay, so that's a really good question about how do we improve the experience and make it more aligned with business leaders, right? So there's a few ways. First of all, what we've tried to do is get industry in to help shape curriculum. As well as shape curriculum, we're actually getting them involved in the assessment of students, because there's no better experience than real-world assessment. And that's not just passing an exam, it means getting really assessed in terms of skills, competencies, attributes, and assessed by an employer. The other part of it is actually getting employers to teach. So we're actually getting, I'm a big supporter of cross-pollination, and I think that the future has to be industry leaders working within institutions and university staff going and working in industry. So we have to become far better at this kind of cross-pollination between employers and academia to close that gap. So I think, and also as well as that, establishing relationships so that students spend a lot of time working at the coalface, because one of the points that a young lady made before about she wasn't prepared for the world of work and she spent many years studying. Well, that's because you haven't experienced any real-world experience. It was all textbook learning, right? So we have to move away from that model. And the other point the gentleman made there about the fact that, the regulatory environment doesn't allow you to be innovative in how we deliver education, well, you're absolutely right as well. So we actually have to start with some basics in terms of getting the regulatory framework to allow us to be a lot more, innovative in how we deliver this. Sorry.
HALT went out and did a survey of about 30,000 business people around the world and asked them, what is it that we need to be doing? And the answer universally was they need to be ready to work on day one. We cannot hire them and wait for a year or year and a half for them to be productive. And so you need to be digitally literate. You need to know how to communicate. All of the soft skills that we started talking about, those are assumed. The ethics, back to the young lady, yes, the ethical issue was a big one. You can send us the best accountant in the world, but if she's stealing all of our money by being able to hide it from the rest of us who don't know accounting, what's the point? So it's integrative thinking, as Cameron said, with industry, with education. The students need to understand that when they graduate, we're going to make sure that you're ready to work from day one.
Thank you, Mac. I know several of you have questions, and I'm sorry, our time is up and we could not get to them. But on behalf of our audience, I would like to thank the panelists for their contribution to today's discussion. And the panelists and I want to thank each of you for your contribution. You did make this session engaging, and I'm very grateful. Thank you again for coming. We are going to be here. We'll answer the remaining questions. Please come ask us. Thank you.